Ever heard of a place called West Papua?
Hmm, not really.
Yeah, most people haven't. It's one of those places kind of off the beaten track,
Right.
But it's been at the heart of some, well, pretty intense global politics for decades, and that's what we're diving into today.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we're lucky enough to have some excerpts from, let me get this right, West Papua, 1942 to 2022, The Legals, the Politics, and the Only Way Forward.
Okay.
It's by Jacob Rumbiak.
And he's,
Is- Oh, sorry, yeah. He's the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the West Papua Provisional Government.
wow, okay. So we're getting a firsthand perspective here.
Exactly.
This is going to be interesting. It gives us a direct line to, like, the heart of the West Papuan perspective.
Right.
But obviously we'll be looking at it, within the bigger picture, all the historical and geopolitical stuff.
Absolutely. It's like piecing together a puzzle, right? We've got one side of the story, now we need to figure out how it all fits together.
I like that.
So for those of us who maybe slept through that geography class, where is West Papua?
Okay, picture this. The island of New Guinea, just north of Australia.
Okay, got it.
West Papua is the western half of that island. Amazing biodiversity. Seriously, the pictures.
Oh, wow.
And it's mainly indigenous Melanesian people who live there.
Yeah.
But, and here's where it gets interesting, it's been under Indonesian control for decades.
And you don't hear a lot about that?
No, you really don't. It's one of those things the media doesn't cover much.
Which is why we're here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Rumbiak's document, it goes way back, starts with World War II. And that period is, well, it's essential for understanding the whole conflict. And what's fascinating is that West Papua's experience during the war, it was totally different from Indonesia's.
Really? How so?
Well, get this. The Dutch, who colonized Indonesia, right, they didn't even directly administer West Papua until, like, midway through the war.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal when you think about it.
It is, because you'd assume it was, the same situation across the board.
Right, but no.
So what was it like in West Papua then, if it wasn't, direct Dutch control?
So, unlike Java, which had been under Dutch control forever, West Papua's main interaction with, well, outsiders was mainly through Christian missionaries.
Mission.
Yeah. And they were the ones setting up schools, introducing, like, healthcare, that kind of thing. They brought, I guess you'd say, Western ideas and systems right into those communities.
Huh. So even back then, West Papua had its own distinct identity, separate from Indonesia.
Exactly. That difference, that sense of being separate, it's at the core of everything that comes after. Their desire for independence, it all kind of flows from there.
It's amazing how those early interactions, they really shape a people's sense of self, don't they?
It makes you think about how history, it just keeps echoing. So we've got this unique history, right?
Okay.
Fast forward to 1949, Indonesia gets its independence. Big moment.
Huge.
But West Papua, giant question mark still hanging over them. Nobody seems to know what's going to happen to them. You'd think that would be it, right? Indonesia's independent, case closed.
Yeah, you did so.
But it's not that simple.
Not at all. In fact, this 1949 agreement, the one that granted Indonesia's independence, it was really vague about West Papua.
Vague how?
It basically just kicked the can down the road, said they'd figure out West Papua's future later.
I can see how that wouldn't exactly ease tensions.
Yeah, it was a recipe for more problems.
So you've got the Netherlands. They're kind of leaning towards letting West Papua decide for themselves, right? Self-determination.
Right.
But at the same time, you have Indonesia, and they're basically saying, nope, West Papua is ours.
Exactly. And all of this is happening while, these two governments are debating in some room somewhere. But meanwhile, on the ground in West Papua, things are heating up.
Yeah, Rumbiak, he describes this period, and you can just feel the, the urgency in his words.
Absolutely.
Like in 1961, the New Guinea Council is formed, the R8.
Right, the RE.
And they take this incredibly bold step. They declare independence for West Papua.
It was a really pivotal moment. This group of people saying, we have a right to decide our own destiny. They even create a national anthem, a flag, the Morning Star flag.
Wow. Talk about a powerful symbol.
It was a beacon of hope, a moment of defiance. But unfortunately, it didn't last.
Because Indonesia wasn't about to just let West Papua go.
No. They saw this declaration as a threat. And their response? A military campaign to take control of West Papua.
And that's where the UN comes in, right?
The United Nations is dragged into this increasingly messy situation.
And I'm sensing a but coming here.
Well, you know how it is with these geopolitical things. It's never straightforward.
Rarely goes as planned.
Exactly. And remember, this is the Cold War. Tensions are running high. The U.S., they're worried about Indonesia siding with the Soviet Union.
Okay.
So there's a lot of pressure to find a resolution, but it's a resolution that ends up favoring Indonesia. And that leads us to the 1962 New York Agreement.
Which Rumbiak's document really criticizes, to put it mildly,
Yeah, and for good reason.
because it basically transferred control from the Netherlands to the UN,
Right.
but then ultimately to Indonesia,
Exactly.
all without the West Papuan people ever getting a real say in the matter.
The agreement did say there would be an act of free choice later on.
Oh, so West Papuans would get to vote on their future.
That was the idea. But that vote, which happened in 1969, let's just say there were some issues.
Issues. Rumbiak straight up calls the transfer illegal. He says Indonesia basically handpicked a small group of people to vote in favor of integration.
It was a far cry from a fair and democratic process.
And to make matters worse, there's this whole other layer of, well, secrecy. Rumbiak mentions something called the Rome Agreement.
Right, the Rome Agreement. It was this secret deal between the U.S., the Netherlands, and Indonesia.
Secret deal? What was in it?
We don't know all the details, but the fact that it even existed, it just raises so many questions about transparency and outside influence in the whole process.
It's like something out of a spy movie. Secret deals, manipulated votes, military campaigns. No wonder this whole period is still so controversial. So, given all this, legally speaking, where do things stand today? It's a lot to unpack, right? All this history, it's still affecting things today. Like, legally, where does West Papua actually stand?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And a million signatures didn't seem to get an answer.
Right. It's complicated, to say the least. But some experts argue, and this is where international law gets murky, that West Papua could actually be considered a UN trust territory, one that's still waiting for a real act of self-determination.
Which, of course, supports Rumbiak's whole argument, right? That the 1969 handover, it was illegal.
Yeah, and he's very clear about that in his document. His point is, international law doesn't allow for colonialism, period.
Seems pretty straightforward.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But like most things in international law, there are other interpretations. Some scholars point to this principle called uti possidetis juris. Basically, the idea that when a new country is formed, they inherit the borders from their colonial period, even if those borders are disputed.
So which is it?
Well, that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? There's no easy answer. It's this legal gray area. And meanwhile, the fight for West Papua's future, it's still going on.
It's hard to imagine, after all this time. But Rumbiak's document, it doesn't stop in the past. He brings it right up to the present. Tells us about these new groups that are fighting for change.
And it's inspiring, in a way. They never gave up. Like in 2015, the United Liberation Movement for West Papua was formed. The ULMWP, they brought together all these different pro-independence groups under one banner.
A united front.
Exactly. And then, in 2020, they took it a step further. They established the West Papua Provisional Government.
Wow. Their own government.
It was a bold move. And both the ULMWP and this provisional government, they're pushing hard for international recognition. And they want a new referendum on independence, one that's actually supervised by the international community.
So what now? What are other countries saying about all this?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. Some countries, they support the idea of self-determination for West Papua, but they don't want to upset Indonesia. It's a delicate diplomatic dance.
And what about Australia? They're kind of in a tough spot, right?
Yeah, Australia is interesting. On the one hand, you've got the Lombok Treaty. They have close ties with Indonesia, but they also have these international legal obligations. It's a tightrope walk, for sure.
So we're left with a pretty big question then. If a million signatures weren't enough to get the UN to really pay attention, what will it take to get West Papua back on the international agenda?
It's the question, isn't it? And one we should all be asking ourselves. Because after this deep dive, one thing is clear. West Papua's story is far from over. It's a story about history, about politics, about international law. But at its heart, it's about people fighting for their right to exist, to choose their own future. And that's something that should resonate with all of us.
Absolutely. It's a story that deserves our attention, our understanding. It's a reminder that the fight for a just and equitable world, it's ongoing, and that maybe, just maybe, we can all play a part in shaping a better future.